Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Today, we finish up Chapter 6 of Book 6 of the Politics, and we'll be looking at Chapter 8, the final chapter, which deals with a kind of return to, after discussing the instituting of democracies and oligarchy in the earliest part, he's now going to review the discussion of offices, okay, and kind of an addendum to the discussion of officers after what we've learned so far from a discussion of first the offices at the end of the last three chapters of book 4, then this question of the information on change that happens in book change, preservation and change that happens in book 5 of the politics. Now we talk about institutions. Now he's going to talk about maybe some discussions of what we can learn about offices, right? He now continues. It follows on what has been said to distinguish beautifully, nobly, the Cologne among the matters connected with the offices. How many and which there are, and over what matters, as was said earlier. In other words, again, this is again back for, again this goes back to chapter 14, chapter 15, right? And the question, book 4, chapter 15, which would be paragraph 22, he says, right, without the necessary offices, it is impossible for a city to exist, a polis to exist, for the community to exist. In other words, you need necessary offices, necessary offices. Without those that relate to its good arrangement and order, it is impossible for it to be finally administered. So the necessary orders are those offices which are essential. The essential offices. Without those offices, you don't have a city. You don't have a political or a community is impossible. But without those that relate to its good arrangement and its order, it won't be finely or beautifully beautifully administered. So therefore, we have to concern ourselves not only the existence, the offices that concern with the necessary offices, but those offices that would allow it to what its good arrangement to be beautifully administered, to be called in that sense. Further, in small cities, there must be necessary be fewer offices, and in large cities, more, as said earlier. Now, again, he tells it back in chapter 15, book 4, and at paragraphs 7 and 8, which he deals with that question. But in other words, the size of the city. In a big city with lots of people, you're going to have lots of offices. As a very small city, you don't necessarily need a lot of offices. So therefore, the offices and the institutions of government will vary based upon the size of the place. Which offices can be suitably combined then, and which must be separated should not be overlooked. In other words, so therefore we have to pay attention to which. Okay, if we're going to build a small place, what offices can be combined? This is division of labor, a question about the division of labor about the offices, which can be combined and which cannot be combined, which functions or things of government that can be put together, and which those cannot be put together, or it's not safe for them to put together. Again, this is the division of labor and the division of power, separation of power, are kind of connected in this fundamental sense, as we learned in our earlier discussion. When we discussed the offices, again, 14, 15, 16, 17, if I remember correctly, the last three chapters of book 4, um, um, where we dealt with the deliberative offices, then the what we call the executive. Today we call the executive, right? The offices per se, and then the discussion of the courts, right? Last chapter of book 4 would be on the courts, right? And now we're going about this again, the question about looking at this, right? He says, so, okay, we're going to be looking at this question, what can be combined, what cannot be? So then first, then, of the necessary offices, There is the superintendent connected with the market. Okay, there was market regulating to deal with the market and force to lose. So the offers that deal with the market, forcing it, not regulating per se, but making sure everything's enforced. Right, contracts are enforced, things like that. They're properly done. Weights and measures, things like this. For which there should be an office that has oversight in matters both of agreements and orderliness. Right, the question of that. Therefore, you need an office that deals with for every for uh, um, for very nearly all cities must necessarily buy and sell certain things with a view to each other's necessary requirements. And this is the readiest way to self-sufficiency, on account of which men are held to join together in one mission. In other words, again, people create a community in order to enough to survive, to be this idea of self-sufficiency. Now, the self-sufficiency, again, this goes a discussion all the way back to book 1 and book 3 about what the purpose of the city is, the political community is. It's to be self-sufficient. It's able that enough that you're able to live a life, and that not only live a life that necessity but necessary things, but also live well, right? So therefore, you have this mechanism by which things have to, in order to be self-sufficient, the things that are necessary for trade and commerce, that a city is self-sufficient. And therefore this market office is an essential element of being able to be self-sufficient. Okay, move little stomach acid. And now next one. So first office seems to be the office he seems to take is about the market mechanism, right? Superintendent regarding the market. In other words, another sort of superintendence connected with this sort and close to it is that over public and private property in towns to ensure orderliness and over the preservation and repair of decaying buildings and roads, to ensure that accusations do not arise concerning the boundaries between the properties of citizens themselves and whatever else belongs to this sort of superintendent similar to these things. In other words, concerning the what? It's about the superintendent that deals with the public and private properties, making sure that this is clear who owns what and how they're owned, who owns what, and making sure that the roads are clearly roads and other things, public buildings are preserved and things like this, and ensure that accusations do not arise concerning boundaries. Accusations about boundaries can lead to conflict, right, between the parties. Uh, uh, Now, and things belonging to these things belong to the second office, right? Most call this sort of office town management. Okay? Town management, right? This is town management. It has a number of parts, and and in more populous, more larger states, different officials are established for the different parts. For example, wall builders, superintendent of wells, harbor. So therefore, again, as you get bigger, the town management can be divided up as it becomes in a smaller town, maybe one officer can handle this. But as the city grows in size and population, you might have to divide labor up to do many things. Okay, because in order to make sure it's delivered correctly and accomplished well. So that's the second one, right? The second thing. The next one is another office is necessary and quite similar to this. Okay, something is necessary. It's concerned with the same thing, but connected with the country and matters outside of the town. These are called field managers in some places, and other foresters, right? This is the country, so one is the urban, the center, the city, the town manager, the urban planner, right? The urban manager, and then the other one is for the properties, the land, the fields, or the forests, right? These managers, the country, the management of these. Um, So therefore, one is the market, one is the urban environment where this town is, and the other one is the fields and forests, right? the resources in that sense that are out there, that are not where people live, but where people, either cultivate their food or cultivate their resources. Of these three sorts of superintendents over these matters, there are three sorts of superintendents over these matters. Right? Another office is that by which revenues from common things are received, guarded, and split up among among each administered element. These are called receivers and treasurers, right? So therefore, this is the people who are what, the revenues from common things, common sources, either either their common assets that are like this, that are received, monies that are received from the people, or that they're owned, guarded by them, and split up, right? And he distinguishes between those are receivers, those who receive it, the money, and those who count it, right? These are called receivers and treasurers. So we have three, then a fourth, money, about managing money and that, like that. So we have the three, the market manager, the town manager, and then the field manager or forester, right? And then last, the fifth, the fourth is the, the treasurer, right, or the receivers, right? Another office that which registered both private agreements and judgments from the courts, right? In other words, someone, now the court manager, overseer of the courts, right? Before these same officials should also come, before these same officials should come indictments and initiations of suits. In some places, they split this office among several persons, but a single office has authority over all these matters. They call them recorders, supervisors, recorders, and other terms of this. Now, 28 here, he says the reading. This is the reading of Entang with the manuscript rather than Dion, which the roles in while in other words, if you read the Diet and all, while in others a single office has authority, right? No, he says that some of this again. This is sometimes a single office has authority over these matters, right? Again, this is the next office. This is the court people who manages the courts, who records public records. This is the public records, records these things, so that we know that a suit is happening. So we know this is the court. The court will hear this. The court holds the documents of this. They initiate indictments and initiation of suits. Okay, they become the center by which it's recorded, and then it has. In other words, now he says sometimes these might divided. These things may be divided, but it's the same principle holds it together. So judgments, private judgments, agreements. We have disputes. We settled this. It's a record here, right? So that's the fifth, right? Next is the one. Next after this is the one that is very nearly the most necessary, okay, as well as the most difficult of offices. That connected with taking action against persons found guilty or whose names have been posted in notices, and with guarding of prisoners. Okay, so these are that is with the collection of fines and public debt. The office chiefly concerned with these matters at Athens was called the actioner, practor, right? Um, Again, this is someone who's going to enforce public notices. There's going to be collect, someone who's in charge of guarding prisoners, posting notices about fines and things like that, taking actions against those who've been found guilty or whose names have been posted in notices. Right. Again, these are these offices, and it is difficult by the fact that it involves much odium, so that unless it is possible to make great profit, men will either not put up with being officials of this sort, or if they do, they will become unwilling to act in accordance with laws. This is a very dangerous one, right? Because it is going to be odious, and they want to be profitable. But it's necessary because there's no benefit in having suits about matters of justice if these do not achieve the end. In other words, you need to have, in other words, if you don't have a mechanism where the suits and justices are enforced, then that's one of the problems in Poland, right? I've noticed that you can have suits, but then everyone has to hire these. When you have a dispute of things, and you have to hire very expensive bodies that you have to go hire vindicators, people who collect it for you, they charge so much that only the wealthy can ultimately afford them. So this is one who can argue this is the oligarchic character in Polish vindication, whereas in America the sheriffs often do this, right? But now there's increasingly and that's the difference in American law. The more, in other words, as the sheriffs are more unwilling to do this, as the public official, who's mostly that, become unwilling to do this, then the regime becomes more that people's sense of justice falls apart, and it becomes less, people's faith in the regime. Right? He says this is important because if people don't believe that the law is just, therefore it does. So that because there's no benefit in having suits in these matters of justice if these do not achieve some end. So that if it's impossible for men to be partners where there's no suits, so also is it where there are no actions taken found against those found guilty. Men cannot be partners where there's not going to be no suits, right? But also there's not going to be partnership among people, trust about this. If there's not going to be the guilty won't be punished. There won't be actions taken against those who are found guilty. If the guilty get away scot free, then the bonds that hold society together start collapsing. Hence, it is better for this not to be a single office, but rather for it to be carried out by persons drawn from different courts, and in connection with the posting of notices to try to distinguish in some way, and further to have some action taken by officials rather than by functionaries of the court, and in particular to having and in particular to having incoming officials take action in suits decided by outgoing ones. Okay, or in the case of serving officials to have one determine guilt and the other to take action. For example, um, the town managers would take the action in cases concerning from field managers, and in the latter cases from the former. In other words, different bodies, different things. These are mechanisms to avoid the corruption that this office provides into it. The less the odium that attaches to the actions taken, the more will the action achieve their end. So in other words, if it's not, in other words, if you can make the way of enforcing this less odious, then it will work better. If there's too much odium attached to it, then unless it profits people and therefore corruption, it leads to corruption of the office. Okay, this is that weird thing about this. To have the same person determining guilt and taking action devolves a double odium, and to have the same taking action in all cases make them inimical to everybody. Right. This is note 30. Accepts the readings of the manuscript rather than Damsier's, but something of this may have dropped out of the text here, right? So he's saying, this is why he adds those things here, right? In many places, the offices that guard prisoners is distinguished from that which takes actions, as in Athens, the so-called 11, right? Again, this is reading deviate, distinguished from, with the manuscript rather than the conjecture of Nehmeyer and Donhitzer. It is true that the 11 of Athens, that in charge of the prisons, do appear to have some role in the collection of public texts, but the auctioneers nevertheless constitute a separate magistrate. So therefore, there is this distinction. These do some debts, but the auctioneers have more separate magistrates. He separates this in the guard of the prisons, right? Hence, it is better to make this separate too, and to seek the same device here as well. Okay, that prisoners, they should be separate from collecting of debt, imprisoning, and that the different, and even maybe separating the ones who's being prisoned and how debts are collected. This office is no less necessary than the one spoken of, But in other words, this office is no less necessary. This idea of enforcement is the other one, right? Um, while it is not safe to give authority over it to, okay, okay. In other words, okay, this office is no less safe than the one spoken of, but it happens that the respectable avoid it above all. In other words, the ones who are enforcing things, okay, you need to respect people. The respectable don't want it because the odium attached to it, right? But the danger here is it's not safe to give authority over to the depraved, as these are more in need of being guarded themselves, of need of being guarded themselves than capable of guarding others. Okay, in other words, you make the poor, you make these people like this who are going to be needing guarding, right? You be careful. The guarding of other people is, oh, no one wants to do that. Collecting of debt, and this is the problem. Collecting debt and guarding. This is guarding people. This is they're the ones who need guarding. The depraved are the dangerous. If you give the depraved the guarding, they'll abuse it. Okay, that's the why it's dangerous in that sense. Hence, there should not be a single official assigned to them, nor should the same one do it continuously. But there should be a superintendent by different persons in turns, by the young, where there is a body of cadets or a garrison of troops, and where sorry, in turns by the young, where there's a body of cadets or garrison of troop, by other officials, okay, and by other officials. So the young, if there's a body of cadets and garrison of troops, and by other officials. In other words, they need someone to overdo this, so superintend them by different persons, right? These offices must be set first, then, as being the most necessary. So those things that we just talked about, these are that. After these are others which are no less necessary, but higher in rank arrangement, as they require much experience and trust. Okay, these are the next offices that they're in other words, those must be dealt first. Now these are going to be as important, but they require but higher in rank arrangement, as they require much more experience and trust. These would be the ones connected with the defense of the city, and any that are arranged with the view of military requirements. So therefore, the arrangements of the one, how one conducted the defense of the city, and those are arranged with military requirements, right? Both in peace and war alike, there should be superintendents of the defense of the gates and walls, and of the scrutiny and organization of all citizens. In other words, for the defense of the city, right? In some places, there are more offices for all of these things, and others fewer. In small cities, for example, there might be a single one concerned with it all. So therefore, this offices that I deal with. What these require experience and trust, right? Defense of the arrangement of those that are dealing with the view of military requirements, and therefore the things that are required for the defense of the city, right? Both the defense of city and warfare, right? Um, they call such persons generals or war officials, strategigos, generals, right, and war officials. Further, if they're cavalry, light armed troops, archers, or naval element, an official is sometimes established for each of these, which are they are called admirals, cavalry commanders, and regimental commanders, and for the parts under them, warship commanders, leaders of companies, and tribal commanders, or commanders, and others are appointed to command any part belonging to these, right? So therefore, there's going to be sub officers on there's a warlike commander, but then there's different types of sub varieties of warfare that are going to create specialization that are going to have different things, like cavalry commanders, the heads of ships, admiral, and then these archers or these lightly armed troops, right? And then under these, there's going to be things things, commanders of warships, leaders of companies, and unit commanders, right? And others appointed to command any part belonging to these entities, right? The entire of these things make up a single kind of office, the superintendents of military matters, right? This is the military matters. All this things is the superintendents of military matters. Now there's going to be one that's supervising things like this, and then there's going to be the right. So therefore, we did the military matters, right? In connection with this office, then, things stand in this manner. So this office. Now, since some of the offices, if not all of them, handle substantial quantities of common funds, it is necessary for there to be a different office to receive the accounts and to do an additional audit, one which does not itself handle any other matter. Some call these auditors, others accountants, others scrutinizers, or others advisors. So, in other words, after military matters, now this auditors, those who don't handle the money but review make sure, kind of look over what has been done to make sure things are done correctly, money's spent correctly. Beside all these offices, there is one that is most particularly authoritative in all matters. So therefore, now all these things, right? Necessary ones now we're going to the most authoritative over all matters. For the same office often has authority over finer disposition, as well as the introduction of all measures, or else presides over the multitude, wherever the people have authority, right? For there should be something which convenes the authoritative element in the regime, right? So this is like, in some places, this is called preliminary counselors because it engages in the preliminary deliberations where there's a ruling multitude. Where there's a ruling multitude, it is called a council instead. So the preliminary counselors or the council, okay, these some kind of officers which exercise, they basically are the people who exercise and oversee the collective aspect of the deliberative element, the authoritative element of this. The authoritative element of this. They convene the authoritative element of the regime, right? And that they are in some places they're called preliminary, in other words, consuls. Now, after listing these offices, now he's saying those of the offices that are political are very nearly this many. So therefore, he's basically saying all these are the political offices, right? Another kind of superintendence is connected with the gods, right? For example, priests and superintendents concerning matters concerned with the sacred things, including the preservation of existing buildings, um, and restoration of those in decay, and whatever the arrangements that are related to the gods, right? Sometimes it happens, for example, in smaller cities, that there is a single superintendent for this. So therefore, not only the priesthood or something that's the maintaining of the buildings, that there is a single. Sometimes in smaller cities, there's a single superintendent for this. Sometimes there are many officials who are separate from the priesthood. For example, sacrificers. Ooh, something fell down over there. Ooh. Um, Priesthood, for example, sacrificers, temple guardians, treasurers of sacred funds. Right? Sometimes there's one person, sometimes in larger cities they're just broken up. Next, after this, this is the office that specializes in all common sacrifices, which the law does not assign to the priests, but which have prerogative of celebrating from this. In other words, have the prerogative of celebrating from the city's common hearth. In other words, common. These officials are called kings by some, presidents by others. In other words, these are the ones who In other words, these are the ones who. In other words, these are the ones who specialize in common sacrifices, which the law does not assign to the priests, but which they have the prerogatives of celebrating from the city's common hearth, executing it or doing it supervised. These are called kings, and sometimes they're called presidents by others. So this last one's the priests, and then there's kings. or presidents. These are people who are going to be a special office, next office. So therefore, the priest, but then a next office, which it's it deals with the execution of sacrifices, common sacrifices, that specializes in all the common sacrifices where the Lord is not assigned to the priests. So things that have to be done, some kind of activity things that the cities have to must do. The necessary sort of superintendents are then, to speak of a summary fashion. So it's repeating it. Now he's going to repeat and everything. And the following. Those are connected with divine matter. So what was second to last was now first. Military matters is going in reverse. Revenues, expenditures, the market, the town, harbors, and the country, and further those connected with the courts, the registration of agreements, actions against offenders, guarding prisoners, receiving accounts, and scrutinizing the audits of officials, and finally, those connected with elements that deliberate concerning about the common matters. So, wait a minute. The next office that deal in the common matters. So, wait a minute. We have starting here. We get another list, another kind of. This is a summary that's very brilliant, but it kind of repeats elements and it reorders it. So the first thing is, he says, that divine matters. Well, in the first list, the divine matters is second to last in the precedent. It's second to last, or the president and kings are last. The priests are above it, right? The priests and kings are at the end of the initial count. Here, the priests, those who deal with the divine matters first, military matters next, revenues, expenditures, things going out, right? The market, which again that was first. Remember, the market was first. Now it seems to be in the middle. The town, again, that was the second. Harbors and harbors, again not mentioned earlier. It was part of the town, maybe. The country, right? Okay, that was the second one, the third one, right? Those connected with the courts, again, this was after that, right? That's separate with the registration of agreements, right? Uh, 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 Actions against offenders, the guards guarding of prisoners, right? Those things again, receiving accounts and scrutinizing the audits of officials, and finally those connected with deliberating about the common matters. Now, I don't remember him talking about that earlier. Notice that the element that deals with deliberating about the common matters. That was, I don't think we've talked about this. Now, this is something he mentions some other than harbors, which is implied in the other thing, the deliberating about the common matters. Particularly to those cities which enjoy greater leisure and are more prosperous, and which in addition take thought for orderliness, are the offices of managers of women, law guardians, managers of children, and the exercise officials. And in addition to those, superintendents connected with gymnastics and the dynastic contests, as well as the other spectacles of this sort as there happen to be. So wait a minute. So if you have wealthier cities, bigger cities, right? Particularly those cities that enjoy greater leisure and more prosperous, in which but then again, which in addition take thought of orderliness, right? These other additional offices come into place. So, okay, I'm itching. I got an itch right up here. It's driving me crazy. Um, so what happens here? This again, these new officers, the wealthier cities that are concerned with orderliness, they will take about these things. They will have officers of managers of women, the law guard, making the guardians of the laws, right? The managers of children, okay, and exercise official, proper exercise, right? These are again, this will be again aristocratic regime we'll talk about next book, right? In addition to these, the superintendents connected with gymnastics. Dynastic contest, right? He says as well as spectacles of sort of these happen. So okay, these the wealthy cities, more events, more dynastic contests, and other spectacles of this sort happen. Right? Some of these offices are evidently not of a popular sort. For example, management of women and management of children. The poor must be necessarily treated. The poor must necessarily treat both their women and children as attendants on account of their lack of slaves. Okay, so therefore, okay, these are going to be less pop. In other words, these are not going to be offices. These last sorts managers are going to be offices are evidently not of the popular sort. The management of women and management of children. The poor must necessarily treat both their women and children as attendants for lack of account their lack of slaves. No account of this manager slaves either. There's implication here. Of these three sorts of offices, okay, there are now there's another thing. There are three sorts of offices under the direction which election to authoritative offices is made. Um, Election to authoritative offices is made. Law guardians, preliminary consuls, and consuls. Right. These are the three sorts of offices under the direction of which elections is to the authority is made. So these people, law guardians, preliminary consuls, these are the guys who kind of over offices under the direction of which election is to authoritative offices is to be controlled. Right. The law guardians are aristocratic. Preliminary consulars are oligarchic, and consulars popular. Okay. Therefore, this is the difference. These offices, these type of offices, will have different type of regimes towards them. The uh, law guardians is aristocratic, preliminary consuls oligarchic, and consul popular. So, concerning offices, all of them have been spoken of an outline. Now, 32 is a note here. This is very interesting. This says it's incomplete. This is an incomplete sentence. In other words, he seems to end it like this, incomplete. This is why some people think this is not completed. This is a fragment that needs more things. Something's missing. And why doesn't he just here? He seems to put the office as division. We don't get an account of the. We don't get kind of a distinction. What's so interesting is the account of the deliberative office. In other words, that what we have earlier, this weird thing where he gives that list. We get this the summary, right, starting at paragraph 21 onwards, we get this list of these things that where we get to the end of it, which deals with what? Which deals with um, uh, uh, scrutinizing of officials connected with elements of deliberate. So expenditures, town market, harbors, county, those connected with courts, rendering of agreements, actions against offenders, guarding prisoners, receiving accounts, scrutinizing, ordering these, common connected with the elements, and those connected with the elements about common matter, deliberate about common matters. This seems to be the most important, that which deliberates about the common matters. This is the sovereign, okay? This is the one who decides, right? Deliberates about the common matters, deliberative elements. This is the first thing he talks about in the book 4. In book 4, the first discussion of the offices, it deals with this authority, that which deals with the common matters, right? Here, it's in the middle, and then it deals with, he mentions it last. Next, what we get is this discussion of wealthier cities and these things, and then we get a point about the here about how the poor are going to not have it's this weird thing about the poor going to treat women and their wives and their children as slaves because as attendants because so there's a count of those attendants, right? Because they lack slaves. Well, wait a minute. What about that? That's again, that's wealthier cities. We're going to have these managers of people. They're going to regulate that. Why? Because again, those who are concerned with what doing it well, managing it well, versus doing it. In other words, is not caring about it. If you're not concerned about well governing, well doing, you're not going to have it. So this is going to be primarily among aristocratic regimes. We'll see. This is why in book 7, when we talk about this will be addressed. Okay, they're going to end here. This is where he ends. He ends book 6 on this fragment here. This all, and then concerning offices, almost all of them have been spoken of in outline. So therefore, all of them have been given outline. Again, I think this chapter forces us to go back and relook at the last 3 chapters of book 4, the more elaborate account of that. But that's what it's supposed to do. Okay, so we're ending here. We'll start chapter next time we meet. We will start book 7, which is about the regime we pray for. If you have any comments or questions or concerns about what we did today, this final chapter of book 6, please put your questions and comments below, and when I see them, I'll comment to them. If you like what you like it, share it with a friend, share it in social media, get this out. If you have not subscribed already, subscribe and get a friend to subscribe. Let's grow the channel some. It'd be good to do this to see what we do. If you didn't like it, then say why. Put it down below, and I'll respond to it. Maybe comments with criticisms of things that I can do better. So something I missed here that you'd like to see done. If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. You want to help me, you want to contribute to the channel to grow some and pay for my costs. You can become a Subscribe Star member of Patreon. I mean, so far there's not many people doing that. And again, I'm just so far late, and I'm not getting the audience I should in that sense. Please do this. Another way you can help. You say, okay, you're not doing much on that either. Again, if it's built, if there's a bunch of people there and they want something, I'll do something. But right now, there's not many, and no one is asking. So, again, I could use the help. Another way you can help is to buy my book. If again, most of you who've watched this, you already bought it. So I'm kind of talking to the same people over and again. That's kind of annoying, you can say. But the way you can help is to buy this book. It's what? This is a notebook on Aristotle's politics. This is not a commentary like my other books or the one I'm working on now. This is a student guide. This is kind of a Cliff's Notes on the politics, where you get to kind of go through book by book, chapter by chapter, a kind of guiding you through it, outlines, charts, things of this, taking parts of developing things. Like today's chapter about the offices. That's something that I have charts in there about that. Okay, this is what might be useful in that sense, as to see how this divides up. So here we end the chapter on this. This you can get this. You buy it by Lulu. I get the the bookstore's profit. You buy it. You can get Amazon, Barnes and Noble, those places. You can get it also, but they're going to make a profit. Okay, by Lulu, which of course they charge you for sending it to you, so where the other places may not. They get free shipping in those places. But if you want to help, you can buy it. You can get a friend, buy it for a friend, buy it for a student you know. Do it like this. Anything that helps. Okay? So I'll stop here. Next time we meet, we will start book 7. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye. Have a good day.